Hello and welcome back to the Runaway American UK edition. Today we're going to be checking out why do the British look down on Americans. As an American, I have a very open viewpoint of why other countries look down on us, especially having lived overseas for more than 6 years. I've lived in the US for pockets of time, maybe the longest I've lived in the US is 6 months since I moved out of the US around 7 years ago. So I have a very different viewpoint, I think, than a lot of Americans do. I've been lucky enough to travel around the world, and I've lived in many different parts of the world. Dubai, South Africa, Hungary, France, Spain, and now I live in Thailand. So I've gotten a viewpoint from all different people around the world of what their views on America are. Some are great, some are bad, some are in between. And recently, most of the time, it's all bad, especially this last year. And I'm not going to argue with it. I have probably a very dark view about the US. I think because, again, leaving really opened my eyes to all of the problems in the US that I had maybe not been privy to before leaving. I think that when you're in the US, you're so the culture is so ingrained into you and you're taught from such a young age, everyone wants to come here. Everyone wants the freedom the US grants them. We're the best, we're the greatest. You're only learning the history that teaches about the great things about the US. We're not learning about the things that are terrible or the things that we didn't really have a hand in anyways. We're taught that they love to. Trump just used this, I think, in a speech that he did to Switzerland or something, where he said you'd all be speaking German if it wasn't for us. Funny that he said it in Switzerland, where some of the population does speak German. So I was okay. But yes, we're 100% taught those things, and obviously, I don't think it's right. I think that we are completely left ignorant. And it's to America's benefit because they want to keep us ignorant, because they don't want us to question, why is our life so trash, considering the fact that we pay such high taxes and we get little to nothing for them, and our crime rates are horrible, and we are horrible to women as well as children. We don't value them in our society at all. So it's very much something that you're taught to believe, that you're wonderful and everything's great until you leave it. And then you're kind of I've been lied to my entire life. Everything that I've seen on the news, everything that people have told me, it's all been kind of a lie. And so the wool's blown over your eyes, and when it's kind of pulled off, a lot of people, I will say this, in the US retreat, they're very much they want to stay ignorant. They want, because if they aren't, then what does their life even mean, right? What if everything I've been told my entire life is actually lies? What is my life, basically, right? It's kind of an identity crisis. So it'll be interesting to hear what they think. I understand, and I'm sure agree with a lot of their comments. We'll see if I disagree with any, but let's hear it.
How do you feel the British perceive Americans?
I feel there's quite a lot of, I hate to say it, but mockery involved.
I think a lot of people think Americans are extreme.
Do you think that the British think that they're better than Americans?
I think some do, yeah.
There's a lot to make fun of, I think.
We're also fantastic at queuing as well. That's another great thing about us.
They're rubbing me the wrong way because they're too extra. It doesn't seem like it's genuine.
Today, I'm in London to get to the bottom of a very important question.
For as long as I can remember, I have had the sense that the British look down on Americans. This is a generalization, and therefore doesn't apply to everyone, but it's a strong enough trend that I felt I needed to investigate this further. Here's a quote from Prince Harry's memoir, Spare, that perfectly captures the feeling that I have about this. With some, the anti-American sentiment ran very hot. I was reminded of my childhood, when people warned me all the time about Americans. Too loud, too rich, too happy, too confident, too direct, too honest.
I'm very curious what people are going to have to say about this. I have a feeling I'm onto something, okay? So, having said that, let's start talking to some people.
Shooting a video for YouTube, could I ask you guys a question? This will be really brief. You hate it? Okay, that's okay.
I'm sorry. Not that easy today, huh?
No, it's not. I was wondering if I could just get a moment.
I've got too much
We're
time.
off to a very slow start. That's okay. Let's just change up the spot because I'm feeling like there's enough projections in that 100-meter radius.
You know, I always feel really terrible that everyone's first attitude is, oh, you're from America, are you? Oh, okay. You know, which is always a bit, you always feel a bit bad about that because I'm not entirely sure why we still do that, but you know. It's
How do you feel perceived as Americans by the British here in London?
A big, stupid, bellowing oaf. Really? Yeah, genuinely. I always feel like I have to apologize for being Americans. Like, I know my accent's the worst thing you'll hear today, but can I just order a coffee?
My experience, I feel like, has been a little bit different. I think that might be somewhat informed by the fact that I'm a student here.
Okay.
At first, there was a bit of a learning curve. Like, when I would speak loudly on the tube, I would kind of get looks, and people would tell me, like, you're being American. Like, can you maybe not?
There's definitely sort of a sense that there is a lot of difficult things going on in America, and that America potentially could be quite a difficult place to live, especially if you're of colour or from the Middle East.
I have to admit, the inspiration to make this video came when I moved to Europe. As I've explored in previous videos on this channel, many Europeans have mixed to negative views of Americans as dumb and uncultured. But to my surprise, the same goes for the British. I've come to realize that the only people...
I'm very confused as like why you would think it would be different though, because of the fact that like I think Europeans think that the reason that we're dumb and ignorant and like we have no culture is because our culture is like 200 years old and it is basically from Europe. You know what I'm saying? Like we have a culture that we like have. I don't even know what you would say is like our culture basically though. Like we have a very much like surface level culture in the United States. Whether I don't know, again, like this is coming from an American who's lived overseas. I don't think you can say like even people that have traveled from America can really say that they know like what it is to be cultured, because it's a completely different entity. You're talking to a place that has thousands of years of history versus your like 200 years of history. So it's just very different. I think the culture is a completely different aspect. And when people argue that we have a culture, it's just most of our culture comes from other cultures. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's very much like the melting pot that is America kind of means that the culture doesn't exist as much. Or if it does, it's more just abrasive, I think, to other people.
The British as intelligent and sophisticated are the Americans. Many Europeans, like the Portuguese or the Spanish, see a very different reality. The British that go off on holiday to get extremely drunk and break things. The British that are isolationist with Brexit.
Yeah.
The British that don't learn foreign languages, that stick to their native tongue. Wait a second, I thought to myself. That's what Americans do. Other people do this as well?
How dare they copy us?
I kid, of course. Still, it does feel like the Brits act like the Americans of Europe, but I am certain that is not something that they'd like to hear said about them. I mean, no offense. I am American after all. Does that not prove my point though? No one wants to stoop to the level of Americans. I felt I had to get my answers directly from the source.
My perception is that the UK is 1 foot in Europe, 1 foot like in the Americas. It feels like it should be in the middle of the Atlantic. Do you agree with that?
I think that's a pretty conclusive idea. But yeah, I think that's definitely true because a lot of people wouldn't even class England as being in Europe. You know, even in England, when you talk about going to Europe, no one ever thinks you mean Doncaster. They always think you mean Germany. You do get some perception that everyone's some sort of like a Valley girl accent or something like that, and I think that annoys people quite a lot. But then again, it's the same way that English people are often perceived as all sort of being from London. The American dream, making yourself better and being seen to be self-improving, and it's a lot about earning money and being the best you can and going to the gym and all these kind of things.
Do you think that's, are you saying it's positive or negative?
I think it's a positive thing for Americans, but I think the way it's perceived is often everyone goes, oh, get out of my face, you know, because they probably, no one likes to enjoy someone else's success, at least in England anyway. I think in America it's probably very different. Oh great, you got a promotion. Fucking bastard, you know.
The identity of being American
Maybe
is
I'm
like such a
British.
thing.
I'd be that way.
Right.
That I don't think other...
Sorry. The identity of
being American is like such a thing.
Okay.
Right.
That I don't think other places have that as much.
I don't think people are necessarily dumb, and I don't think it's a question of being dumb. I think it's just that there's this idea of like, yeah, being the best. To think that like people in America, depending on where you're born, you can have access to care or not, it's frightening.
Yes.
And I don't know how you can speak about being the best when you can't even make sure that everybody's like taken care of. Are you treating everyone the same way in America? No, not everyone is treated the same way, just like not everyone is treated the same way in Europe.
Yeah.
Having been to America a lot, they often ask, obviously as a joke, but just like, do you know the royal family or anything like that?
So do you feel that generally, the big generalization, there's mockery towards the Americans and Americans towards the British? It's more like cute. We think you're cute.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
How do you feel about Americans thinking you're cute?
Well, it can be taken as a compliment, obviously, but if they think that we're, like, as a country, not really a force to be reckoned with, then just because we do all these, like, things that date back to long before the US was established, it's not really relevant that they can mock us for that.
Is it condescending, would you say?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Or ignorant?
More ignorant. It doesn't, like, hurt me. You know?
How do you feel Americans perceive the British, first of all?
They kind of look down on us.
You feel that?
I feel like Americans think like they're on top of everything, and there's always competition between the two.
So do you feel like the British have a chip on their shoulder a little bit because of that?
Yeah, a lot.
What do you think the British are better at than Americans?
Yeah, polite, really.
More polite?
I agree with that.
More talkative, more helpful.
More helpful? The British are more helpful?
Yeah, than Americans. But Americans are nice, they're funny, got good music.
Got good music, okay. Well, the British have good music too, man.
Americans are taking over the music scene.
But I mean, come on, there's a lot of great British music.
So here's the thing that I think is going on here. We are not the same, the Brits and the Americans, but we sure have a lot of similarities. Compare us to the Japanese, or to Native Americans, or to Ethiopians, and the differences between Americans and the British seems relatively small. We're like blood siblings in the village that is the globe.
So here's what all of this started to make me think of. There's a concept in psychoanalysis, I'm gonna read you the definition, but it's called the narcissism of small differences. This comes from Freud.
The narcissism of small differences is the idea that the more a relationship or community shares commonalities, the more likely the people in it are to engage in interpersonal feuds and mutual ridicule because of hypersensitivity to minor differences perceived in each other. We see this all over the world, between the Argentinians and the Chileans, for example, between the French and the Belgians. And indeed, I think this is what is happening between the Brits and the Americans. But at the end of the day, I feel like we make the little things that make us different much bigger than they really are.
The way that we speak and the words that we use.
Yeah.
And again, we were talking about this, weren't we?
Yeah.
About
we were
certain
talking
words.
about things like autumn versus fall. And it's like that's often something that people like bring up. And for some, well, it's because it's a simpler word and it's like, fall, American.
You guys don't say
classic.
fall?
No, we don't say fall. We
Oh,
say
interesting.
autumn.
I say fall.
This is autumn. Not fall.
But you can say autumn as well.
All right, before we go any further, I
interchangeably.
want to quickly thank the sponsor of this video,
I'm
BetterHelp.
gonna go forward with this. I think in terms of like words and things like that, yes, your accents, I prefer them. I really do. And I'm sure that a lot of people hear my accent and think it's quite grating and annoying. I prefer most British accents just because obviously, and that's the thing that's like funny to me is I will say like the one guy who said Americans perceive themselves to be better than British. That hasn't been my personal take. I think that a lot of Americans like wish they were British. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they kind of perceive the British as like a much classier version of themselves, which is probably true, which is why they have like a inflated like view, like not in a bad way, like it's they look at you and they want to be you. They watch your movies. The royal family is quite big in the United States, even though we have nothing to do with it. But it's a fascination of some sort, I think, of like what this kind like this these several countries obviously, but they're different than us, but they have similarities. They speak the same language, but a lot of the times we don't understand it. I understand it, but a lot of people do not understand certain British accents, Scottish, Welsh, an Irish accent. Like they're very different, obviously, and there's several different ones. I do think, again, like America has the common misconception of like many nations thinking like London, like everyone comes from London. But when I go overseas a lot, people will say like, oh, like they know New York, LA, Chicago. This is normal. Like cities that are famous are the cities that you know. Oh, are you from LA? Like, no. Or like if I'm from Florida, I'm just like, yeah, I'm from like Florida. Oh, Disney. I'm like, yes, Disney is in Florida. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it though. Like I think that it's like in their mind, they're thinking, people think they're connecting with you in that way, right? They're like, oh, you're from England. Like I've been to London. I don't think people like when they say that, they're trying to be rude or abrasive. They know that places exist outside of London. I would hope. I may be too kind. I may be being too kind and saying that they know, but I think that they know that places exist outside of London. They're just trying to like relate to you in a way. that's one thing that Americans do try and do quite often, is they're trying to relate to you when they talk to you. Whether or not it comes off as annoying and like a know-it-all or ignorant, it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You can take it or leave it. I'm one who, like, I don't do that quite as much as I used to because of the fact that I know it can come off as like stupid. Like, you're like, oh, you're from Europe. Okay, like, I've been to Europe. Like, it's not like tons of different countries. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you're from Europe. They say they're from Europe because they don't want to have to go into like a thing with an American of like, what part of Europe? And they're like, oh, I don't know that. Where's that? Like, what is that? Oh, I've been to Germany. Yeah, so agree and disagree with parts of it, but I definitely agree with, like, you can't say you're the best and not take care of every single person in your country. So, like, saying you're the best and then, like, also doing the opposite of that is not really, like, it's a bit concerning.
When I come to the UK, I have the impression that I've come halfway across the Atlantic. I'm not just off the coast of continental Europe. And by that I mean, culturally, it feels so much more similar to the life that I had in the US. The convenience of life, the speed, the capitalism, the language.
Everyone speaks English. Everyone's like got the same sort of core values. I'm not necessarily a big Christian person at all, but we all come from this like Christian-based countries. America and Australia are English. There's some things that happen in history, but at the end of the day, we're kind of all the same group of people in that regard.
Culturally influenced.
Culturally influenced by the same group. So I personally don't see many differences at all.
I mean, I've got wonderful American friends who I adore. So that question for me is a difficult one because I think they're great, they're fantastic. Yeah. I think the difference is in the way our language is, in the way we use different words. That's where there's a difference.
So pretty minor.
Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes some of the British media or the portion of the British population that looks down on Americans, is it a way to deflect some of the issues that exist here? Well, could that be said of all societies?
Yeah, you can say that of all societies, but you can also say that about the media. They're always distracting, aren't they, from topics, whatever it is.
America's seen as very alpha male, if you think about it in terms of masculine and feminine.
That's very true.
There's an alpha
I agree with
to
that.
Americans.
I 100% agree with that statement. I do think in terms of England, like the UK in general, and I'm not saying they're not alpha males. I honestly believe most of the men in the UK could beat the living crap out of most of the American men. However, I would never hear an American man admit to that. Like, you guys play rugby. I've seen it. You could beat the living crap out of all of our football players. Like, not a question. Not a question. So my thing of, I think, though, that those same rugby players, those same football players who are these, like, tough, masculine men also have I'm not going to say feminine side to them, but they're much more, like, the feminine side is not seen quite as, like, as a disadvantage or something to push down, or, like, as not as horrible to be perceived as in the US. If, like, someone calls you, like, a wuss or a girl or refers to you as, like, feminine in the US, they're going to get, like, their butt beat. You know what I'm saying? Like, that is a very different connotation, I think, in the US versus the UK. And I think that's a lovely statement. I think that's 100% true. And it's one reason, again, that I prefer a lot of the UK. I definitely prefer the males in the UK versus the US because of the fact that, like, the alpha male stereotype is very present in the US. It's extremely toxic. And I just don't think it's quite as prevalent in the UK. I'm not saying that everyone doesn't have that. There are some people, I'm sure, that still have it. But I think it's it's much more subtle, and it's not quite as aggressive as in the US's. And this is just my opinion. It's what I perceive from what I've experienced.
And maybe it's just the way they speak, the accent, but you don't really have that sense of Britain. I think there's a stereotype of the repressed male, that soft-spoken.
Considering we're like right on the edge of Europe, we have more in common with America in many ways than we do with the rest of Europe, which in theory is where we should be more aligned. And I think there's sort of something that can feel sort of slightly odd about that, you know, like with the whole Brexit thing, breaking away more from where we're most closely connected to, and sort of being in a situation where, you know, we're going to end up with chlorinated chicken instead.
There's this tendency to think of Americans as just, you know, they're simplistic, really.
Are you, like, annoyed by the Americans here in
Sometimes.
I wouldn't say.
Depends how they are.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is, I love to drag the US through the mud and criticize it for all the things that I think it deserves criticism for. But the second the Brits start criticizing me or the US, you have nothing to say. Kind of like, I can criticize where I grew up, but you aren't allowed to. And the British, in my opinion, are doing their version of the same thing, criticizing themselves to no end, but no one wants an outside opinion. Maybe we all do this. I think we all do this. It's like pointing at someone else's flooding house when your own house is on fire.
So I lived in America for 6 years. I lived in California, Alabama, and Oklahoma.
Alabama and Oklahoma.
Everyone hears my accent.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, where in America are you from? I'm like, bro, I'm actually from Australia, but then they give me their little opinions on American stuff. So I've actually had to play defense a couple times since I've been out here.
Are you serious?
I'm so serious. They talk about guns, or they talk about this, but they don't have like a very good understanding, not just English people, this is people around the world, even in Australia, of the history of America and why those things became what they were. People trying to throw rocks and then hide their hands.
Yeah.
They don't want the blame to be on them, so it's easy to put it on the big superpower that is on everyone's TV.
My perception is I don't consider Americans necessarily lesser in terms of like lifestyle, culture per se. I just think it's a bit more apparent than it is in the UK, but the UK is just as problematic.
There's always sort of a sense in the past that like America was sort of, 2 decades ahead of what was happening in this country. There is a sense that we're getting closer in a time frame.
I would say younger generations tend to be a bit more, and the only word I can think of it is shameful of the heritage. I think it's a lot of things from like colonialization and things like that. There tends to be a lot more shame around it.
We're a small island, right? So we've got a small island mentality, but because we've got a small island mentality, we've got to overcome it by kind of that impression that we're the best. And I think that's changing, though. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a total reflection of society now, but I think historically it has been, of course. Let's flip the question. How are Americans perceiving the British?
My answer to that is there is a power dynamic going on. And for better or for worse, the U.S. is much more of a world superpower right now. So I don't think that the U.S. feels threatened necessarily, like competitive with Great Britain. Because of that, I think there's kind of like they're cute, you know what I mean? Like they're Harry Potter and James Bond and sophisticated and
use words like autumn.
Exactly. But I also think that there's also a major degree of ignorance. Like the U.S. is so self-involved.
Yes.
We're not even paying attention to what's going on elsewhere in the world. So there's not even enough to form an opinion,
Now this video
great. Yeah,
was
that's a great
definitely
perspective.
supposed to be in good fun. I harbor no ill will towards the British. I find our rivalries as human beings across cultures, across nations, to be comical and interesting. It's like an insight into human psychology. And despite all of the, criticizing going on here, I'd like to end on a positive note. I'd like to express my appreciation for a few things that I think the British do better than Americans. Your healthcare system, for one. Also, the Premier League. They say football was invented in England, and if that is true, as someone with Argentinian background, I can only thank you. I also have to thank you for your incredible music. What a contribution to our collective heritage.
You guys know I love
It is a foreign idea to me to have a royal family, but I respect the commitment to tradition.
I did move here the week that the Queen died, so it was really interesting to see. I think my first impression of like the British as a public was that of like mourning for their queen, the 14-hour-long line to go see her lying in state. So I think it was a little bit of a shock. This might sound silly, but how procedural the British can be. I noticed that tends to be, like every British person I've met, tends to be very procedural, as opposed to Americans, I think, are a little bit more, like, dare I say, free-spirited or individualistic. So, I mean, I think that's not to say that one is better than the other.
That's 100%.
And as a final
I
note,
think
we are
right.
obviously a world of individuals, and so stereotypes never fully work. Still, I find it so fascinating to explore the stereotypes and cliches that we have for one another. Not always, but often there is some sort of basis of truth there, or else they wouldn't spread and persist as they do. Anyway, having said all of that, I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please consider liking it, which tells the algorithms to share this with more people.
Yeah,
I thought it was
like
fun, and it's a format I'd love to
I've watched a few
continue
of his
exploring.
videos. He's quite informative, and I feel like he's, again, as he said, like, he doesn't like people necessarily pointing out the wrong things about his nation, right? I'm one who, even though I'm from the United States, I very rarely get like hurt or upset when people point out its criticism or critical of it, because again, I'm first to be critical of it. I do think that in order to be critical of another country, you should also be looking at the faults in your own. However, I think that because America, as they said, is like on such a large scale, it's under such a microscope because of the fact that one, it involves itself in everyone else's business, but two, it has been a superpower for so long. Not necessarily saying it's like right that it's the superpower, but it is currently. For how much longer, who knows? Probably not long. But it's one of those things where, because of the fact that we are under this microscope, it's easy to see all of our flaws. They're much larger than life. You can see them. Everyone knows them. It's not hard, right? However, other countries, you don't have the same knowledge of, because they're not as in the media. They're not talked about daily from other countries' perspective. When I was in Hungary, I was absolutely shocked at the amount of issues going on in Hungary. But I would have never known about them, obviously, because I grew up in the United States. A lot of people don't even know Hungary is a country in the United States. Or when I would say I live in Budapest, they'd be like, where the hell is that? And I'd have to reference a movie that was shot there. Oh, I love it. That's so pretty. Sorry, I have to get going in a couple minutes. So I was just looking at the clock. I am a person that 100% believes, though, we have many differences. Those differences are glaring, I think, and obvious, but I have respect for each and every country. I don't always have respect for the way they handle things. I have respect for their people. I don't necessarily always have a respect for the government of certain countries, because I do think that, again, there are countries who, I'm not going to get into the politics of things, but I've never thought war was something that was great. Obviously, I don't think most people would be it's a necessary evil in some cases. It's, in my opinion, should be avoided at all costs if possible. So, but I do have respect for people's people. I know that every person is different. As someone also said, Americans are very individualistic. We're very self-involved. That's something I think I've gotten a lot better at, as one, being living in Europe, and two, now living in Thailand, which is an even more community-involved place than even Europe is. It's very much everyone helps together. Everyone is there for each other. It's very much the society benefits when we all benefit. You know what I'm saying? At least from what I've experienced so far in Thailand. And I think that that's a beautiful sentiment. I think that we could learn from each other. While I don't think we need to be extremely self-involved and extremely individualistic, I think that we can have our own interests at our heart while also respecting that what benefits society benefits all of us, right? In the long run. Yes, I may lose a few $1 million if I'm a millionaire, but guess what? Someone else gets to eat and have healthcare. So yes, yeah, that's just my general thoughts, but I would love to hear from you guys what your thoughts on this video are. Were you annoyed by the host of the video because he is American? And do you agree with what your fellow Brits said? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments. Thank you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. I'm signing off. Bye-bye.